Today, we continue our series on the Centenarian, the 100-year-old servants. This morning, Centurion would be the better word for me this morning. So, Centenarian servants series as we continue looking at servants of God who were at least close to, really close to, or were for sure over 100 years old and still serving God in mighty ways. And we're not looking at this. We're not looking at these centenarian servants in a way to just for kicks. It's just something to look at, just something to, well, why not? You know, useless knowledge. We're looking at it in a way that how then can we learn from what they did, how they lived? How can we learn that for us, so that when we too are in our old age, as we like to call it, and I know people who are younger than me and go, I'm so old. I'm like, whatever. And so, right? But in our old age, we too can serve the Lord, and we can serve our community. Right, and also remember what I shared with you last week was it's not only that we're not only the old who could serve, but also we're never too young to serve nor too old to serve. And so, how young can we be as well? Even though we're looking at centenarians, we're also going to see today one of the people in our study today is in our message today is a 7-year-old. Okay, again, never too young, never too old. Okay, so let's everyone in here, by the way, interesting thing, I was thinking about this. Everyone in here, and I don't know everyone's age 100% because I might be off by a year or two on a couple of you, but everyone in here, I'm confident I could say, is at least 20 years away from being a centenarian. At least 20 years away from becoming 100. And that means that you're a young pup compared to the servants we're talking about. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And so anyway, that's useless information except for the fact that, guess what? You're young compared to them. And they continue to serve the Lord. So anyway, each week as we keep talking about this, as we keep walking through these different centenarians, each week we're going to throw more of your excuses out the window for why you can't serve. Okay, you're welcome. And so it's okay. And we're going to give you more and more reasons why you can serve the Lord and why you should serve the Lord and why we want to and should want to serve the Lord. And no matter how young or old you are, as Steve always says to my wife, your prom theme was fire. So if your prom theme was fire, that's okay. You're still not too old to serve the Lord. Okay? And so that's where we're going to walk through that some more here today as we continue on with a man by the name of Jehoiada. Brian, by the way, great job pronouncing it. As I called him Jehoiada for many years, Jehoiada, and it's Jehoiada. So anyway, by a show of hands, how many people here knew anything about Jehoiada, even just his name? Do you remember him from your scriptures at all, from your reading? Okay, that's pretty impressive. How many of you actually knew anything about him before we talked today, other than his name's Jehoiada, and he lived back in the Bible? A couple of us, right? And that's exactly what I expected, right? It's not a common name. It's not someone that normally is in your scriptures. It's not someone the pastor's usually talking about. And but that's okay, because most people, if you ask most people, remember Jehoiada? And they'll be like, who? They'll probably be like, you mean Jehoiada? Right? You know what I mean? It's just like, no. And so they like to mess with us with their J's in their language back in the Bible. So anyway, most people though don't. But for Jehoiada, his name, we're gonna talk about who was he, right? So Jehoiada, which means the Lord knows, or could be interpreted as the Lord has acknowledged. So his name means the Lord knows, or the Lord has acknowledged. And it's found he's found primarily in 1st and 2nd Chronicles and 1st and 2nd Kings, with a little smattering of him here and there in other scriptures. But his primary story is in those 4 books. And so, in 2nd Chronicles 24:15, it says, "Now Jehoiada was old and full of years, and he died at the age of 130." 130. If we're talking about some centenarian servants, He certainly fits the bill, right? And so, because he served the Lord until he died. Okay? And some of us, how many times we've heard people say, man, when are you going to retire? I thought you retired. Why are you still doing this? Why are you still preaching? Why are you still... I have a good friend of mine who retired from preaching for health issues, managed to get through those health issues, and he fills the pulpit about half the Sundays of the year for other churches. Why? Because he still wants to serve the Lord. And so Jehoiada certainly fits our criteria as a centenarian. And so some of those stories that are in First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles, if you wanted to get kind of a good view of Jehoiada, you could go to 2 Kings 11 and 12 and 2 Chronicles 22, and you'll get a bulk of Jehoiada. But his greatest accomplishments were overthrowing Judah's murderous queen, Athaliah, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today, and establishing a new monarch. We're going to talk about that today. Leading a national revival. We're going to talk about that today, and restoring the temple to its former glory. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. He didn't do much, just a little bit. That's a couple things, okay? So Jehoiada was actually a very big thing, and for us to be sitting here going, but I didn't know anything about him. There's a lot of people in the Bible you don't know anything about, or don't know much about, and it's okay. We're going to learn. So unlike every other Old Testament priest, though, Jehoiada had a special honor bestowed upon him because of his faithfulness to God, and because of his faithfulness to the people, and because of his faithfulness to the temple. And today, instead of the temple, we would say because of his faithfulness to God's bride, the church. 2 Chronicles 24, verse 16, he was buried with the kings in the city of David because of the good he had done in Israel for God and his temple. Excuse me. And if we think about it, this is Jehoiada the priest who gets a special. Nobody got buried with the kings except for the kings, right? And so he gets buried with them. Yet Joash, the monarchy he puts in place, he helps install. We're going to talk about today. Was not buried with the kings. After he had Jehoiada's son assassinated, after he had Zechariah assassinated, the first Zechariah, not the second Zechariah, and some of you may not have realized there's two of those in the Bible. Both of them were prophets, but one has a book, that's the second one. And this Zechariah did not have, Jehoiada's son did not have a book named after him. But anyway, he was assassinated by this Joash that we're going to learn about today a little bit. And so that's kind of a quick setup for who Jehoiada was, right? And who he is to us yet today. It's kind of, I think it's a beautiful poetic justice that the Bible shows us with Jehoiada's faithfulness to the Lord and him being buried into his body, being buried in with amongst the kings, and yet a king who, in the end, he did well while Jehoiada was leading him and guiding him, but after Jehoiada passed away, he became very worldly and wicked, and so Joash was not allowed in, and I think that's just some great poetic justice from our scriptures. And so anyway, so as we continue on, we see our centurion, our centenarian. See, I told you it's bad today. We see our centenarian. Actually, he appears. One of the first places we see him is when he started serving God. He started serving God, obviously, he's an Aaronite priest. Okay, and so which means he's of Aaron, Moses' brother Aaron. He's of that lineage. He's of one of their priests, and he serves. One of the first places we see him serving is King David. When King David's at Hebron and he's getting ready to go take the kingdom from Saul, and the people from the country or from the nation all over the place are coming to his aid to help him, and just a few people came, just a few 100,000 warriors showed up, and we get to see Jehoiada there. 1 Chronicles 12, verse 27 says, including Jehoiada, as they're listing all these people that came to aid King David, it says, including Jehoiada, leader of the family of Aaron. In other words, he was the leading priest. He was the high priest in the Aaronite priesthood, leader of the family of Aaron with 3,700 men. They didn't come to pray. He was a warring priest. And the thing that this really lit up with me was this here. All the people who keep telling me how a pastor's just supposed to just be docile, just be calm, just calm, no violence, no nothing, you know. Go to the Old Testament. See what God's priests did. You want to see some people do some business in war? Go to the old priests, right? But those are also the same people who tell me that you shouldn't get worked up about anything. Those are the same people who believe that Jesus was just a little docile little sheep. He's just a little weak little dude. You know what I mean? They don't understand that Jesus was, no, you didn't mess with Jesus. He was a man's man of his day. And so, anyway, so Jehoiada is a leader in the family of Aaron. He's one of the high priests of the family of Aaron, and he brings 3,700 men to go to war with King David. Not go give him a scolding, not to go have a little conversation with him, but to go to war with them. So that's when David he's young. He's about my age. Somewhere around that 40, 50-year-old mark. Okay? And so, what? I'm not that much over 50. So anyway, I'm glad someone caught that, though. So it was wasted otherwise. So anyway, but he really steps up when he's 90, around 90 years old, is where we're going to step into Jehoiada today. And Jehoiada, at about 90 years old, comes into the picture with helping King Ahaziah. Some of these names are really tough. King Ahaziah has passed away. His mother, Athaliah, now is trying to wipe out the royal lineage. Okay? She's trying to kill her grandchildren. Okay? She wants to wipe out the whole lineage. The reason she wants to do that is not because she's just grieving over her son's death. It's because she wants the throne. And so she takes the throne. She has an opportunity, and she's taking the throne. So she's working on wiping out each and every one of her grandchildren and anyone else in Ahaziah's lineage, in the bloodline. And so this is what would happen if this happens. This is from the bloodline of David. This is the last vein of the bloodline of King David. Okay, and there's a couple people come through King David, like maybe Joseph from Joseph and Mary, maybe that one guy, Jesus, right? So see where this could be a problem? And so you could see God's hand all over it, because he promised that David's lineage, right, was where the Messiah was coming from. But she's trying to stop that lineage. What a win that would be for Satan. But so anyway, we're going to step into this. The first thing Jehoiada does is he saves a lineage. Jehoiada saves a lineage. 2 Chronicles 22, verse 10, when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family of the house of Judah. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King, see the J's and the H. The J's are H's and Y's and all kinds of things. It's just crazy. King Jehoram took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered, and put him and his nurse in a bedroom, because Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram and wife of the priest Jehoiada, was Ahaziah's sister. She hid the child from Athaliah so she could not kill him. He remained hidden with them at the temple of God for 6 years while Athaliah ruled the land. So again, I'm going to apologize on the J's because I keep trying to pronounce the different J's the different ways. So, but anyway, if Yehosheba doesn't hide Joash and his nurse in the temple, the Davidic line ends. Because if they're caught, if her and Jehoiada are caught, Athaliah will kill them as well for trying to keep the bloodline alive. Okay, so which would wipe out the Davidic line. And so what we find here is also, now we find out that Jehoiada is a brother-in-law to King Ahaziah, because he's the one who's married to Yehosheba. And so, why are they hiding him in the temple? Why would they hide him in the temple? If we know the story, if we know the background, then we know that Athaliah worships Baal. Athaliah doesn't care about the God of the Jews, the God of the Hebrews. She doesn't want anything to do with our God. She's not going to go to the temple. She instead goes to the temples of Baal and does her sacrificing and her worshiping over there to a man-made God. So the safest place for them to keep Joash at, is in the temple of God. And because of her rejection of God, she'll never even know he's there. And so the reality is that Athaliah steals the throne. Joash's siblings are all wiped out. And if he's found, she will end the line of David. So what's our takeaway? What's our takeaway from this? So for us, from this portion of our message today, it's not like we're going to be recruited to go and save the Davidic line, right? And so we're probably not going to happen, right? But boy, you know what? We are called to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so therein, continue the line of David. See what I'm saying? We're called to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so in a far way, and I mean, it's a stretch, I'll admit that. But in a way, we're continuing to do the work of Jehoiada. We're continuing to do the work of the lineage of David. And even though we're not called to physically defend the line of David, we're not called to save Joash or anyone else in that line, how about your lineage? How about your lineage? Can you maybe help save your loved ones? Can you help save, maybe they're not physically, hopefully physically your loved ones aren't in danger of death, but they might be. But their eternity may be in danger. Where they'll spend their eternity at may be in danger. And that's far more important than whether they got blood pulsing through their veins or not today. Maybe you don't have to physically save them, but maybe you do have to save them from their Athaliah. Maybe their Athaliah is called depression. Maybe their Athaliah is called addiction. Maybe their Athaliah is called, and you fill in the blank. We all have our Athaliahs. Who do we need to be saved from? And more importantly, who do your loved ones need to be saved from? And who is it that God's calling you to step in to hide in the temple? And what better place to hide than in God's word, in God's body, in God's hand? Which loved ones do you have? And what temple are you going to take them to? They stashed Joash in the temple. Maybe the temple you need to take them to is a Christian counselor. Maybe the temple you need to take them to is a Christian addiction program. And I'm not saying non-Christian addiction programs are all evil, wicked. I'm just saying, if we're looking at hiding them in the temple, shouldn't we have them in the Word? Shouldn't we have them pointed to God instead of to the tree outside or your pen or your whatever you call your higher power? Because there's truly only one higher power as a follower of Jesus Christ. There's only one temple we should be directing them to. I really struggle when I've had pastors tell me that they've directed people to certain programs that are non-biblical, non-Christian programs. I have a problem with that when there's Christian ones available. Sending them to counselors because, well, I'm friends with them, or I think they're pretty good, or someone said they're good, or whatever, but they don't believe in God. The last thing I'm going to do is send my Joash to Athaliah. And so, where's the temple that you need to take your loved one to get them away from Athaliah? So, Jehoiada saved a lineage. We have an opportunity to save our lineage, whatever that lineage might look like. That lineage, by the way, might not be a bloodline. It might be that best friend. It might be that loved one who has no relation as far as what we like to call it in the world. There's no blood relation, no DNA. Are you willing to risk all that you have, all that you are, to help Joash and save their lineage, whoever your Joash is? So Jehoiada saved a lineage, and then Jehoiada forged a king. Jehoiada forged a king in his 90s. In his 90s, Jehoiada takes the responsibility. He's 90-ish. We don't know exact year, but he's about 90 years old when he and Joasheba take Joash and stash him in the nurse in the temple. So at 90 years old, he takes his nephew and says, you know what? We're going to protect him, and we're going to start raising him at 90 years old. My wife 20 years ago, well, actually 30 years ago, when we met, said, there's going to be no more babies. Just so you know, there's going to be no more babies. And some of you are sitting here 50, 60, 70 years old. Guess what? At 90, he was taking on an infant to raise him up. And I know he lived to be 130. Chances you living to be 130 are, well, unless God has a hand in it, pretty slim, right? But the reality is, this was still old age for them. And so at 90 years old, he takes in this nephew and starts teaching him and raising him in the ways of the Lord. And he trains, he becomes I lost my word for it. He guides Joash, teaching him how to be a king. And the reality is, Joash at 1 year old or whatever, he's an infant. At that age, it's kind of hard to teach you. You're not going to lay out the scriptures before him, right? You're not bringing out the scrolls. But teach him how to live as a godly person. We can teach our children. You're never too young to learn. Little Miss Avery can learn, right? She's learning all kinds of stuff. Guarantee you she's learning it, right? And so we're never too young to. So he starts teaching them the ways to live as a godly man. And at 6 years old, at 6 years old is when Joash's reign begins. He's coronated at 7 years old. He's coronated. 6 years later, he's coronated as king. And then that's when Jehoiada becomes his advisor. That's the word I was trying to think of. His advisor, and guides him as king until Jehoiada dies at 130 years old. Which is just a few years. We know that King Joash was king for 40 years. So at 7 years old, he starts that reign. And so 40 years later, right? So we know that Jehoiada, for about 40 years, close to 40 years, actually a little over 40 years if you count the 6 years before he was coronated, he raises this child, if you will, and he teaches him to be king. In fact, he goes so far as to when they're preparing to coronate Joash as king, install him as king, he reaches out to the entire land. He reaches out to everybody who is faithful to the house of David. Anyone who's faithful to the house of David, he reaches out to them and calls them in. In fact, he secures support from the Carians, who were mercenaries. He secures support from them to be able to guard the temple and the palace. And in 2 Kings 11, verse 4, it says, in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent for the commanders of units of 100, the Carites and the guards, and had them, the Carians, right, the mercenaries, and had them brought to him at the temple of the Lord. He made a covenant with them and put them under oath at the temple of the Lord. Then he showed them the king's son. Did you catch the sequence there? First, he covenants with them. First, he makes them swear an oath. And then he reveals that he's got the king's son. And then he reveals Joash to him. He commanded them, saying, this is what you are to do. You who are in the 3 companies that are going on duty on the Sabbath, a third of you guarding the royal palace, a third at the Sur gate, and a third at the gate behind the guard, who take turns guarding the temple. And you who are in the other 2 companies that normally go off Sabbath duty are all to guard the temple for the king. All. So everyone who's coming, all these mercs, okay, you're all going to guard the king. Even though 2/3 of you are supposed to be off duty. You're all going to guard the king. Station yourselves around the king, each of you with weapon in hand. Anyone who approaches your ranks is to be put to death. Did it say, oh, no, please don't come in here? No, you got to stay over there. Stay over there. No, if they come near you, they come to you, you're to put them to death. That sounds like a priest. He's just a little feeble. Right? Again, it's back to that whole Aaronite priesthood. Stay close to the king wherever he goes. So Jehoiada then arms them. He arms them with shields and swords that King David had provided. So when Solomon built the temple, they were able to be installed into the temple. It's interesting to me how God provided the armament during David's reign for the protection of King Joash. God always provides. No matter what you're going through, no matter what struggle you got going on, guess what? Jesus said, no matter what troubles we have, he's already overcome it. Don't worry, you're going to have trouble. I already overcame it. It's okay. God has already placed the sword and the shield that you're going to need at the time that you need it. It's already there. All you have to do is do what God's asking of you to do, which is exactly what Jehoiada was doing and what he had these mercs doing. So I find it interesting how God provides way ahead of time. So anyway, then they crown the rightful king instead of Athaliah. They anoint Joash, and they have their coronation, and then they all do what? They shout. Our scriptures tell us that they shouted, they celebrated, they hoorahd in the temple that Athaliah won't go to, but they hoorahd so loud, she came to check it out. They worshiped their new king so loud that she went to the temple that she didn't believe in and she wanted nothing to do with. That was a safe harbor for 6 years. And in verse 13 it says, when Athaliah heard the noise made by the guards and the people, she went to the people at the temple of the Lord. She looked, and there was the king standing by the pillar, as the custom was. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her robes and called out, treason, treason! She shouts out treason, and then the author adds to it that the enlisted chiefs in the towns and all that stuff. He talks about the enlisted chiefs. He talks about the people, if you go back and read the entirety of the scripture. And he talks about all that, and that all lines up with the people of the land. People of the land is God's people. And evidently, the queen's policy, now this is interesting because the people of the land, that's who he sends out to for support so they can do this. And evidently, the queen's policy didn't restrict any of that. evidently the queen's policy, she's so worried about her being the queen, and yet she fails. She fails to pay any attention to what those Hebrew people, those Jews are doing, those Israelites and their God. Forget about those priests out there, right? And so she has not, obviously has not restricted access to the temple, because when all these people of the land come, and when these mercs come in, these different guards, when they come in, nobody bats an eye about it. How is it you swap out the entirety of the army that's protecting the temple, protecting the palace? How do you swap out all the people coming in and have all these excess people who were coming in and going to the temple? Suddenly there's this influx and nobody pays attention to it. Because as much as Athaliah thought she was in charge, she was not. God was. Amen? So they install Jehoiada. Oh, and by the way, or they install Joash, but Jehoiada, by the way, then has, again, if you go back and keep reading, he has Athaliah murdered, has her killed, off royal ground, or temple ground, but he has her executed. That her evilness, her wickedness was stopped in that moment. And then from that point on, after the coronation and after the rejoicing and after Athaliah's put to death, so she cannot continue her wickedness, then Jehoiada becomes Joash's advisor for the 40 years. And while Jehoiada is alive, Joash, it says, our scriptures tell us that Joash had the temple rebuilt. Again, like I was saying earlier, that's just one of them little things Jehoiada did, right? He has the temple rebuilt. He did, according to our scriptures, he did what was right in the Lord's eyes, according to 2 Kings 12:2. It says that he did what was right in the Lord's eyes. Joash did really, really good as long as Jehoiada was alive. After Jehoiada dies, Joash, that changes. But I want you to understand this, another takeaway. What can we do about this? No matter how old we are, we can guide. No matter how old we are, Jehoiada, up until his death at 130 years old, he guided, he led, he directed, he ruled. Part of those years, because Joash at 7 years old isn't ruling, let's be honest. It's Jehoiada, it's Yehosheba, right? They're the ones who are actually leading, guiding him. They're his advisors, as well as the other advisors he has around him. But the primary one was Jehoiada. And he did really good. Here's the thing. We're never too old to lead and to guide. We're never too old to mentor or be an advisor to our Joash, whoever our Joash is. And by the way, we're also never too young to learn from someone who's older. Because think about this. Now, when Joash is in his 30s, he's still listening to his advisor, Jehoiada. The downside is he never, ever gained a real relationship with God, because as soon as Jehoiada was gone, Joash went the other way. Joash never fully committed himself to the Lord. Jehoiada, though, walked with him in whatever way he could. He raised him up, led him, so that he would know, who are you walking with right now? Who's your Joash that you're walking with in your circle, whether bloodline or not? Are we walking with anyone? Are we leading and guiding anyone? Because here's the thing, we're never too old, but guess what? We're also never too young to lead and guide. Kids, I want you to understand it. We got kiddos, we got family service. I made sure I included you, okay? So here's the thing. Joash became king at 7 years old. Okay? Joash became king at 7 years old, and guess what? you all can be kings and queens as well, even at your young age. You can become God's children. And if we give our lives to Christ, if we are followers of Jesus Christ, then we are adopted into God's family. If we're adopted into God's family, we're royalty. We become royalty. The pagans, those who don't believe in God, those who don't follow Jesus Christ, they're not royalty. Some people have the misconception that we're born and we're just automatically God's. No, we're not. Now, there's the up to the age of and I lost my word, accountability. Yep, up until the age of accountability, which in the Hebrew day was approximately 15 to 17 years old. Up until the age of accountability, you're granted in. That's no reason not to start to be the king or queen that God desires you to be, even when you're 5, 6, 7, 10 years old. And mom and dad, you should be teaching them that they're a king and a queen. A prince and a princess. They are royalty. They are royalty, and I want you kids to understand that. God loves you so very much, and you're a part of his family. And when you're a part of his family, guess what? You're royalty. Don't let this world teach you lies, that you don't count, you don't matter, because you are royalty. So, King Jehoiada saves the lineage, forged a king. And that's one thing that because I lost my place because the kid thing wasn't in my notes. So I put the kids in now. And so, but here's the thing, right? It's never too late for us to teach. It's never too early. Here's what I've said for years and years, has been we've got so many people who are dying of old age, and nobody's ever asked them for their wisdom. Nobody sat down across the table. Some of my favorite conversations was sitting down with my grandparents across the table and just learning from them. And here's the thing. Some of us are grandma and grandpa, right? Okay, so what are we teaching them when they do sit down across the table from us? Or are we teaching them to live like the world? Or are we teaching them to live like Christ? Because if you're claiming to be a follower of Jesus Christ, you should be teaching them how to live like Christ. We've lost so much wisdom to those who've gone before because nobody asked about it. Or on occasion, you have those folks who are of that age and just flat out won't talk about it. But most of the time, it's because we don't ask. So who's the guide out there? Who's the person out there who could be your advisor, who could help lead and guide you on your path with Christ, that you haven't asked, you haven't talked with? Right? So it goes both ways. So Jehoiada saved a lineage. He forged a king. We can do both the same in our own way, in our own time. And number 3, Jehoiada revived a nation. Jehoiada revived a nation. Jehoiada's follow-up to the coronation of Joash was with a covenant. He follows it up with a covenant, with a religious restoration of the people, of the people. Okay, 2 Kings 11, 17, 18. Jehoiada then made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they would be the Lord's people. Okay, he makes a covenant that everyone's going to be the Lord's people. He also made a covenant between the king and the people. Okay? All the people of the land went to the temple of Baal. Check this out. All the people of the land, okay, so this is again, all those people, he went to all the people looking for support, looking for protection for Joash. And now he goes to all the people of the land. It says all the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols to pieces and killed Mattan and the priest of Baal in front of the altars. Now, I don't want you going to kill nobody, but guess what? There's a whole bunch of temples of Baal out there. They're all over the place. Why are we not tearing them down? You know why he tore it down? He did not want them to go back to that temple. Because most likely some of the people of the land had been lured into the temple of Baal. Happened to the Israelites over and over and over and over again. And every time God had them, brought a revival, every time God restored them, every time he told them to destroy those temples, destroy all those idols. And every time that there was a downfall was what? Because they went back to those stinking temples and back to those idols. What Baal temples do you have in your life you need to smash and get rid of? And who are you going to covenant with? And some of you are like, well, I was in for a minute there. And then you said that covenant thing, that means I got to include someone. Just like I said, if I don't say it, I can put it off till tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. If you don't covenant with someone, you don't make that agreement, you don't come in covenant with someone, swear an oath to each other that you're going to smash whatever that Baal temple is that you have, there's no one to walk with you in it. There's no one to hold you accountable for it. And you can go right back to your old temple. And that's why we don't smash them. God's people covenanted to God, covenanted to Jehoiada, covenanted to each other. And then they went and they smashed the temples. And they smashed the idols. What can we do? What can we do? We can start smashing some temples. We can smash some idols. And we can become in covenant with each other in that. And that doesn't mean if you come to me and you're like, Pastor, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get rid of, maybe it's alcohol. So I'm going to get rid of this alcohol. I'm going to get rid of it. And we talk about that, and I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to walk with you in that. We're going to smash that temple, right? That doesn't mean I get to go, well, you idiot, you said you weren't going to drink anymore, and you went and got drunk last night. Not doing that. That's not walking with your brother and sister. But we're going to help you smash that new bottle, that new temple. We're going to smash it. And whatever that temple is, whatever that Baal is, we do it all in love. We do it all in love. So who's God got in your life that you need to covenant with to help them get rid of their temple or for you to get rid of yours and to smash the idols therein? We should be willing to do this, not just today, but every day. That covenant doesn't last for today, this week, this month, this year. Oh, it's New Year's, right? So, it's a New Year's resolution. We're going to smash this temple. But next year, I can start it back up again. That's not it. When you're in covenant, you're in covenant. It doesn't stop just because you did something to make me upset. A covenant is a covenant. And here's the thing. If we're willing to save the lineage, if we're willing to forge the new king, if we're willing to revive the nation, maybe the nation is your house. Because some people are like, well, but what do I got? I'm nobody. Well, no, you're not nobody. Again, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, guess what? You're a prince or princess, you're a king or queen. Okay? You're royalty. If you're royalty, then you have a castle. Anyone ever heard their dad or their uncle or their grandpa say, your house is your castle. My house is my castle. It's my domain, right? It is your castle. As long as you're royalty. I'm not asking you to change the whole world. God's not asking you to change the whole world. He's asking you to become king or queen of your castle. He's asking you to smash the temples, the idols of Baal in your life. He's asking you to rescue your Joash. He's asking you to step up in covenant with him and somebody else. And if we're willing to do that, if we'll step out with as much faith in that as we did in this, if we'll step out in faith and we'll do what we're called to do, we'll change our castle. We'll change our little kingdom. And when we change that kingdom and it becomes a Christ-like kingdom, it becomes what God calls it to be, then it will change this kingdom. And when it changes this kingdom, it can change that kingdom. And when it changes our community, we can change the state. And when it changes the state, we could change the country. And guess what? God wants a revival, and it needs to start happening, and we need to do it because that's what He's called us to. That's what He's called us to. So often we think there's no way we can't change the whole world. No, you can't. God can if you'll be obedient to what He's called you to do. That's what we're called to do. He isn't asking you to change the world. He's asking you to change your life. Start doing what He's called you to do. Reflect Jehoiada. Be Christ-like. Do what God's calling you to do. Start being in charge. Letting Christ be in charge, but controlling your kingdom, your castle. Living it like Christ would live it, like He wants you to live it, like the Holy Spirit's been leading and poking and prodding you to do. And if you'll do that, He'll worry about the rest. It all comes together. It all comes together. Because guess what? When we're covenanting, when we covenant with someone, it's not always going to be our spouse. When we covenant, it's not always going to be our child or our parent. And when it starts building and it builds and it builds, God wants to revive this nation. I believe that with absolutely everything in me. He wants a revival, but it can't happen when we continue to refuse to be like Jehoiada. When we continue to refuse to be like Yehosheba. And it has to be in the heart. The change has to be in the heart. Because if I'm guiding you and then I'm gone, what are you going to do? Are you really going to change or not? That's what He's asking us for. A heart change. And when we're willing to revive our home, we're willing to revive this body, when we're willing to revive our community, when we're willing to revive this state, when we're willing to be a part of the revival of this country, we too will be buried with the kings. And better than that, we'll spend eternity with Him. What's your decision? Who are you going to walk with? Whose lineage are you going to save? Who are you going to be obedient to? Are you willing to be revived so that you can revive others? Because a dead person can't raise a live one.